Hello. It is Sade Camille, and it is another episode of From Her View. And I'm excited. I'm always excited when it's time to do an episode because it is my illustrious audio banger. But before we get started, I have today's prayer card, and it says, "Do all that you can to live in peace with everyone." Romans 12 and 18. And this is quite ironic because the book that we're going to be talking about today is The Art of War by Sun Tzu. So I was first introduced to this book while at church. We were doing a sermon series on it. And at the time, I listened to the book, listened to the sermon, and I was getting it, but I really didn't get it. And it wasn't until recently that I finally understood, and everything made a lot more sense. And so I thought it would be amazing to bring this to the podcast, to be able to discuss it in a way that I think would be helpful for a lot of other people. Obviously, I learned this in the context or in the confines. It's not really the confines, but I learned it in the confines of being at church and what that means. And so if you are a believer, if you're not a believer, if you don't subscribe to that, but you have definitely heard that there is spiritual warfare. And the spiritual warfare that we experience day to day is a mental, emotional, and on a spiritual level. And people tend to think that spiritual warfare doesn't exist, but I'm here to tell you that it does. Whether you believe in it or not, it believes in you, and it does exist. And what I like about this book, The Art of War, which is a very short read, I have it on audiobook. I probably listened to this book, I don't even want it, like 10, 20 times. It's something that I always like to revert to, especially when I'm in my head about something or I'm feeling very frustrated in a scenario. It is definitely something that helps me realign myself because it's giving me the perspective from Sun Tzu, who was a military genius back in China. So we're going to go ahead and talk about the art of war and how we can use these same scenarios within our lives when it comes to things like spiritual warfare. But a lot of people use these in political, social relationships, and also business relationships. And if you know me, you know that From Her View is a love letter to my children, but a love letter to my younger self. You know, a lot of the information that I've gathered over these years of living, I feel that if I would have gotten this at a younger age, if I would have understood this concept at a younger age, how much more further would I be in my journey in life? And with all the other things that's out there that a person could consume, if this reaches your ear, I thank God that it reached your ear. And please listen to more. There's some good, juicy things afoot. But it's one of those things where we get so consumed by our day-to-day life, and it's funny because I I thought I'll ask my kids. I have such a unique relationship with my children, but it's very much rooted in love and then understanding for where they're at. And I thank God for that. One of the things that I never, ever wanted to do was to lose sight and lose touch with who I was because of who I am. So I never wanted to lose sight of who I was because of who I am. And what that means is I'm very much in tune what it was like to be 7-year-old Sade, 6-year-old Sade. I know what it was like to be 18-year-old Sade. I remember that. I know the thoughts that were going on in my head. I know the pressures that I faced. I know the questions that I had, the doubts that I felt. And I also knew that the conversations weren't being had with me in the way that I wish it would have happened, or in a way that I think would be beneficial and conducive to other people. Now, not to say that I didn't get what I was supposed to get, because I got something. But at the end of the day, I do think that there needs to be a little bit more discussion, a little bit more bridging the gaps of explanations or reason why we don't want our children to do certain things, or reason why this is not a good route, or reasons why, or giving them different routes to pursue. We'll hop into this dang audio banger, but one of the things that is something you will hear all the time is, wait for sex until you're married. And it was something that I was told, but that was just it. If I knew the implications of doing that and what that does to you at a mental, spiritual, and physical level, I definitely would have not been 17 and pregnant, 18 and with a baby. I wouldn't have. But because I remember what it was like to be 16 and 17 and not really understand self-worth, basically getting a lot of what I thought was important, or the imagery that I was seeing from, movies and television, and thinking that that's exactly what life is, and just seeing the examples around me and thinking that that was the thing to do, and not realizing girl, that's not the thing to do. Obviously, I'm definitely gonna have a more, I think, raw and uncut conversation about that, because the more that I think about it, I think a testimony of the good, the bad, and the ugly is definitely needed in order for people to really understand the true ramifications of that, right? So I've had a conversation with my kids, and I'd be like, look, the way that you feel, completely normal. Everyone goes through that phase of feeling this way. But you are a precious person. You embarking on that because it was meant to, how do I want to say, consummate marriage, first of all, but it was made by God to enhance marriage. It was meant to bring you together as one. So if something is meant to amplify a connection between you and an individual, you don't want to be around amplifying connections with a bunch of people, baby, because now you're amplifying connections with them, and then the residuals of the connections that they've amplified with other people. It's a whole thing, and it's something that I broke it down to them in this way, obviously a little bit more in depth than that, and they understood it. They were like, okay, it's normal for me to feel this way, but I also don't know entirely who I am at 16 or 17 or 15 or however age, to be making these choices, to be making these decisions. I don't know what I like. I don't know who I am. I don't know what I want. So why would I do something so life altering for the sake of not feeling left out? That's crazy. That's crazy. But that's for another episode. Let's get into this audio banger. So, the main idea of the art of war is we will win the fight when we know when to fight and not to fight. So that's one of the main ideas. That they have 5 core topics of the book. Topics, or chapters, if you will. But the 5 laws of the art of war is the moral law, heaven, earth, the commander, method, and discipline. So within this, within the art of war, we have these 5 laws. And he goes into breaking them down. But the main thing is that the key to victory is the one who knows their enemy the best, and the one who knows themselves the best will win. And so I love this book because it does kind of turn a mirror to yourself. I have this thing where I try to be super duper duper ultra hyper aware of myself. I think self-awareness is very important. It is something that I preach a whole lot about on the podcast, if it is taking some sort of assessment. Obviously, at the end of the day, our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ is the only one that can really, really, really tell you about you. These tests do help kind of bring some sense of awareness to you. But at the end of the day, that's who's really going to give you the tea on you. But having to know oneself. So I took this concept a lot, and I found it that in my life, I used to be able to, in my younger years, I'm not like super old, but honestly, I feel very, very different since having brain surgery. I feel different. Like, I don't even know how to describe it. Like, physically, I'm still my strong self. I'm still strong, but it's a focal of like, I used to be a sprint runner and now I need to get my weight up to doing marathons. And so I used to be the queen of a burnout, have like a good endurance to go, but not knowing when to slow down and maintain. So that's about knowing myself. Okay, so what would be my enemy in this scenario? Sometimes your enemy is yourself. 1,000% of the time, I would say. The enemy is yourself. I mean, there are extenuating circumstances. Like, even if when it comes down to things like business, what would be some of your enemies as far as business? Well, could jump and say like a direct competitor, but also it could be things like not being able to keep the cost of goods, hemorrhaging money, not having good marketing. Like, there's so many things that can be your enemy. But one of the things that was my enemy when it comes to this particular topic was the fact that I overbooked myself. I was a chronic overbooker. And I could do it real good, but when it was time for me to be burnt out, I was burnt out for a very long time. Like, it took longer for recovery than it actually took for me to do that thing. So I had to take a step back and be like, okay, girl, you really need to take some time and learn yourself a little bit better. And this is literally a tactic that I use. And I do credit this book. I credit a couple other great books too. Definitely The 12-Week Year, Atomic Habits, UOU. There's so many good ones that I've been, reading, digesting, because it's audio bangers, so, we be listening to our books. But there's so much good information out there that really helps you pinpoint areas in your life where you're like, yeah, this needs a little bit more attention than I initially thought. So I'm coming to this situation where I'm like, okay, I can't afford to be down bad like this. But also, I need to be able to do these two things. And so I had it where I was literally insane. What's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. Like, girl. And that's what I was doing. So I'm doing it. I'm like, okay. Until finally I sat there and said, like, okay, you have a full-time job. You always worked a part-time job. The only time this truly worked was when you knew that you weren't working 7 days a week every week. But now I'm at a place in space where it's like, okay, yeah, I need this extra income, but I cannot be at a place besides my full-time job that is requiring me to be there at a specific date and time continually. Like, I need full autonomy of my second job. And when I tell you, I went through so many different interviews, talking to people, letting them know this is my availability. And a lot of people were willing to work with me with it. But sometimes we tend to have a lot of oversight and not see all the little gray areas and the nuances that make up some of our decisions. I had it before where I really, I got my real estate license, and I was like, okay, what would be a good business strategy for myself? Okay, I have this full-time job. I work 4 days a week. I think I'm going to take this opportunity to get a job at a barbershop in the city. Get a job at a barbershop in the city where I live with no traffic, a good 30 minutes away from the city. With traffic, a good hour, hour and 10, which it's always an hour, hour and 10 during the times that I'm trying to travel, except for the morning time when I would get there. And it was a nice barbershop. This was my first time being paid solely commission because I wanted to get myself in a space where I was used to that concept of eat what you kill. I've never had to experience that, but in order to level up in business, the people that make the most money, the top 1%, they don't exchange their time for money. So I had to get into the concept of, okay, there will be times where I am doing the work, but the fruit of that labor is on the back end, because that is a large part of real estate. Sometimes it takes 6 months, sometimes for a deal to close. That's just the nature of it. I mean, that's worst case scenarios, but it is a possibility. So I was trying to be a little bit realistic with myself going at this and being like, okay, I'm going to do this. This is going to be perfect. And I made a huge oversight. I get off at 2:30 a.m. I get home maybe 2:45. That's enough time for me to get a quick nap in before I'm up at 7 to go work an 8-hour day. So literally, my schedule was so tight, I had no wiggle room. Zero wiggle room. I was so confined, like, it was bad. It was bad. I didn't have time for myself. I didn't have time to work out. I didn't have time to be there for my kids. I was just like, I gotta make money, I gotta make money, I gotta make money. And at the end of the day, I was spending more money because it's like, okay, I don't have time to cook. Oh, so now I'm forcing my hand to buy more fast food and things like that, which, 2 meals of buying fast food for my budget was enough food for the dollar amount is enough food for a week. But that's how much more I was spending. Now, I also was doing a lot of figuring and factoring. Okay, if I'm going to be working here, that means I am going to be spending more in gas. I drive an SUV, so that's another cost associated with that. Okay, so if I'm doing that, and also I have to pay for parking. This is Chicago, baby. Chicago. If you know, ooh, you know. So now I'm having to pay on top of that. So I needed to make a specific dollar amount every week for it to be worthwhile for me being there. And it ended up just being super stressful, very irritating towards the end, and I walked away. Now, that situation was just set up poorly, and I was the builder of that poor setup. So that is knowing yourself. So, like I said before, the art of war is about military tactics, but it is also the oldest known military tactic book. And it is very famous for some of its quotes. So some of the quotes that I enjoy is, "Let your plans be dark and impenetrable as night, and when you move, fall like a thunderbolt." And what I like about that is, like, it sounds very much like Lil Wayne's "Real G's moving in silence, like the G in lasagna." Baby, like, that's what it sounds like. Such a bar. Is that you want to be strategic and studying. And in order for you to do self-work, to level up within yourself, that does take studying yourself. And I had to study myself. I had to say, okay, Sade, you desire this. Okay, there's only certain, you can only do gig work as a part-time job. You can only do work that you create the schedule when it benefits you to do it, but also you are in control when you don't want to do it, when you need a break. Your full-time job is enough to keep your family sustained and taken care of. You do have aspirations to save and invest a little bit more aggressively. Love that for you. Love that for you. But you're going to continue to fail in this area if you don't get a little bit more strategic and smarter about how you're going to attack this. And that's the best way to do it. That's real conversations with yourself. Sometimes people can't have those. There's plenty of times where I just have to be like real with myself and be like, yeah, girl, let it go. Just let it go. Let it go. Just leave it alone. But that is one of my favorite quotes. So, The Art of War is a book of conflict. It's conflict knowledge and tactics revolving around several key concepts. But knowing when to fight and when not to fight is the most important. Knowing when to fight and knowing when not to fight. If you are like me and you have that sense of fight or flight, baby, she ain't a fighter, she a fighter, okay? That is the hardest for me. Now, I think about it and it does make things a little bit better. Let's expound upon that. Okay, for one, I've tested it. I've known something made me really upset. I'm a knuck of you buck, square up. But I was like, okay, I'm not going to do that. Take a deep breath. Let me listen to some worship music. Jesus, take the wheel and whatever. And you know what happened? I got more information out of the scenario. I got more data. What is that? I got a chance to know my enemy more. That's when knowing when to fight. One of the things that Sun Tzu says in the book is appearing to look weak when you're not. And this is something that I feel like I've discussed on the podcast before, but for some reason, I think it's just a gift from God. I used to think it was a curse. It used to infuriate me. But now it is a superpower. I'm extremely underestimated. Egregiously underestimated. And it used to make me want to snap. But thinking about it, I'm not mad at it now. I'm not mad at it now because when a person underestimates you, when a person thinks nothing of you, when a person doesn't see you as a threat, they will show more of their tail. And I love it. Absolutely enjoy it. I've had it where, muscle menos, I understand it a little bit more than I speak it. And I've had one scenario where I let it be known, like, I know what y'all are saying. You guys are rude AF, and it backfired on me because then it was like, oh my gosh, it's this and this and this and this and this. And, it backfired in me. So I was like, you know what? The next space and place I go where that is a language that's spoken, I'm just going to listen. I'm not even going to put on airs like, oh yeah, I know what y'all saying or this and that. I'm just not going to do that. I don't see, I saw what happened when I did do that. And it's two different scenarios, right? I've had it where like, it was a guy that was Spanish speaking, didn't know English very well. So I would speak Spanish to him. He would, try to speak English to me, and we would try to help each other learn it. Just because I mean, I'm not really good at it because I don't have anybody that I speak to on a day-to-day basis. I mean, I don't have a show or a movie that I like where I'm watching it in Spanish and I'm just like totally into it. I mean, I don't do that. So I'm not super good at it. But I've had it where like, I pretend like I don't know and I go about it that way, and it has worked for me. So this book is amazing because it's taking concepts that you think would only be applicable for literal war, but they're so good because it can help you with the war in your mind, like the war in your business. Several scenarios, right? So in the book, it's a very, very short book. I want to say it's probably like maybe audiobook wise, maybe an hour to an hour and a half. It's not very long. I don't know the page number if you're a reader off the top, but I did want to take a chance and kind of like do a little bit more in depth with this one. Even though it's a short read, it's so rich. And so I wanted to take an opportunity to really kind of not give you the full gambit, but give you enough to, hopefully you check it out for yourself. So this book does go over direct and indirect attacks to use in different circumstances, to the point where, like if your enemy is, encamped on this way, you're going to attack them in this way, or if they're by this way, cut off their water supply. Like it goes very, very in depth, but there's some essential things that I want to go over because I feel like these are applicable for your life in general. Okay, so I'm just gonna go over 3, nothing crazy, nothing too crazy, and you're just gonna have to figure out the rest for yourself. Okay, so for the first chapter, that's called laying plans, and this is all about being prepared and going over the 5 essential elements of war, which is moral influence, weather, terrain, command, and doctrine. So obviously being prepared is being prepared. So for myself, I am a give me the worst case scenario type person. Like right now I am embarking on something. It's not something that I've never done before per se, but it is also something that I've never done before. And a question was asked, how do you think you're going to be able to attack the situation, or what's your mindset about the situation? And it's one of those things where it's like, I'm kind of prepared for this. I'm very much aware that we can make a plan because God does say, write the vision, make it plain. Making a plan is important. But also, while making that plan, you have to make room for error, a margin of error. You have to plan for, okay, well, if this doesn't work, I'm able to do this. So like, for instance, let's say for some reason, if my internet goes out, I have a mobile hotspot on my phone to back it up, and I can, still continue to do the podcast, mobile hookup, and it'll be fine. Those are okay if it has to go down like that. Like if my power went out, I can charge my phone in my car. I could go and get an adapter like that has like a plug, like a wall plug adapter for your car, and hook that up, and I'll be able to like cook with a crock pot in my car and do whatever I need to do. Like being prepared for, okay, if these certain things happen, how am I going to be able to move with that? Like I've had like, oh, your gas don't work, your gas cut off, how are you going to cook? You have to be prepared for those different what ifs. And so that's what the plan is, being prepared for that. Now we also have chapter 4, which is the tactical disposition. So, with tactical disposition, victory should never be assumed or taken for granted. There are essential war presented and included measurements of space, estimation of quantities, calculations, comparisons, and chances of victory. So I kind of want to look up tactical disposition and like in the literal sense for its literal meaning. It's so funny because I like Google tactical disposition and it just pops up, Sun Tzu's. So I think I'm going to have to do it. So tactical disposition is a few things, but it's the timing and the preparation for battle. So you have defensive tactics that secure yourself against a defeat. Then you have offensive tactics, which is the ability to defeat the enemy, which requires taking the offense. Defensive stance, which is standing on the defensive, indicates a lack of strength. Attacking stance, attacking indicates an abundance of strength. Patience and timing, which is a skilled warrior, makes themselves invincible and then waits for the enemy to be vulnerable. And that one struck a nerve with me because I feel in this Christian walk, that's exactly what the enemy does. This is why at first, when we were going over it in church, I don't remember the specific books of the Bible that we were going through. I am going to have to like revisit that and then do a series on that, just so I can help you guys out. So it could be like a little bundle because it's so good. But this tactic, as far as tactical disposition goes, patience and timing. A skilled warrior makes themselves invincible and then waits for the enemy to be vulnerable. In the Bible, 40 days, 40 nights, Jesus is in the wilderness and he's tempted by the devil. So he's fasting, he out there. He doesn't have, to the naked eye, his I don't want to say his full strength because, Jesus is all powerful, but he appeared vulnerable to the enemy. But you and I both know that Jesus had all power in his hand. He wasn't the slightest bit down and bad. He just appeared down and bad. That is patience and timing. So when Satan stepped to him, he hit him with this is actually something I say all the time when I was fasting, because child, the enemy will try to come up at you, girl, be like, oh my God, So I would say, we do not, for it is written, we do not live by bread alone, but every word that proceedeth the mouth of the Lord. Like, that is something that I have to use. So coming at him with the word when he thought we were vulnerable, and we pulled out our sword, which is our scripture, which is our word, that helped combat in that situation. So deceptions, inconsistencies can be useful way to deceive the enemy. I have this thing. I feel like I kind of am, not so much now, but I used to be very like inconsistent all over the place as far as like the patterns of which I would do things. And I would intentionally do it because I said, man, if anybody was, I grew up in a neighborhood where like there was a lot of watchers, people that just like to watch everything everybody else was doing, like the neighborhood watch, like just people that was their source of entertainment, was watching other people come and go and who's all up in their house and what did they bring in their house and all that jazz. Like, that was their favorite thing to do. So I made it a habit to be very inconsistent, meaning I didn't really come home at the same time every single night. I wouldn't go the same places all the time. Like, I would change it up. And so that's what the inconsistency would do. You would think that in this sense that he would, you know, attack from this angle, but he would attack from a different angle. And being with that inconsistency, it would throw the enemy off because they would be expecting, oh, you know, I was going to say cannons, but I'm like, they didn't really have cannons at that point in time, I don't think. But using that as a way to basically allow your enemy to feel taken aback. Now, I do have a certain level of consistency where it's like, okay, like, you know, she'll be here. She might get here right on time. Or, you know, whatever the case may be. Those are certain things where I say like I have the consistency in that way. But those are just a couple of the chapters within the book. If you haven't read it, I definitely recommend reading it. It's full of gems. I will say it is a book that the more you read it, the different things that you get from it, because it's like 100 and some odd pages, and so you read it and then you feel like, man, I read that so fast, and you know, da da da, and then you have to go back and read it because then you have to kind of like sit with something and be like, okay, well, how can I use this in my life? Like, how does this make it applicable? Because people use it for various reasons, but that was not his original intent for the book. So it is teaching you about literal war. So you do have to navigate through that and look it through the lens of where you're at for yourself in this current moment in time, and how can you use these tactics for your life. Now, another one of the chapters that I really did like was the use of spies. So this is going to focus on the importance of developing good information sources, and specifies the 5 types of intelligence sources and how to best manage them. So the basic use of spies. And so you're like, okay, well, how am I going to use spies on my day-to-day life? If you are a person who sees yourself as being a successful entrepreneur, you're going to need a little bit of insight and information on exactly what that looks like. And you're like, okay, well, like, I need an informant for that. Not necessarily. I take it as like doing your research, you know, doing your due diligence about in the things that you can do. I like this because it does tie into Atomic Habits a little bit, and it's quite funny because I was literally having this conversation with my daughter today. We were having a topic of, you know, an area in which she needs improvement in. And I said, okay, what are you doing to, you know, get to this goal? Or what are you doing to get to this goal? And she said, well, I'm trying to wake up early. And I said, well, actually, waking up early is a destination. It's not a tactic to use. That's that's not a part of it. A tactic would be, you know, making sure I'm, you know, showered, ready to go the night before. My clothes are laid out. I know exactly what I'm wearing. I have my school bag packed. It's located where I can find it. My phone is on the charger charged. My headphones are charged and in my bag. I have everything that I need in an easily locatable space. So when I wake up, no matter when I wake up, I could easily, you know, get myself together and go out the door. So the conversation was that takes a little bit of preparation, and what she's describing as what she's doing to help herself is actually a destination. like getting to somewhere on time, but there's a lot of extra work that needs to be done. You know, getting everything ready the night before has been a thing as old as time. I feel like is a way to feel more energized and ready and prepared to start your day versus, picking your outfits then and there and everything like that. Because that does take thought and time, especially if your stuff is not organized, or if it is organized and everything is put away, like you still have to go through everything to find your stuff. That is a level of irritating, and it's also quite time consuming. I hope you take the opportunity to go ahead and read Sun Tzu's The Art of War. There is such good things where it comes for business, for self and development. It's such a rich book. Like I said before, it is a short read, and it is something that you can constantly go to, and it just is giving what it needs to give every time. This has been an episode of the From Her View podcast with me, Sade Camille, and it was a good time doing audio bangers. Look out for the next one. I love me a good book, child, so tune in next time.